Some are rusting in remote harbors. Others lie hidden beneath cold seas. But all were once instruments of immense destruction, and many still carry the risks they were built to unleash. Nuclear cores, radioactive leaks, and torpedoes that haven't seen daylight in decades. These are the 14 most terrifying abandoned submarines of the Soviet era, from unsettling relics to potential disasters waiting in silence. Number 14. S-49. S-49 was a Project 633 Romeo, a patrol submarine built to shadow enemy ships in Cold War waters. For years, it quietly followed foreign vessels, listening, watching, and ready to attack if ordered. But it never got that order. In its final years, the Navy stripped it of weapons and tied it up in Kamchatka, using it as a floating power station. When the engines failed for good, no one repaired them. By 2019, S-49 sat abandoned, rust creeping over every surface. To most people passing the dock, it was just a dead hulk of metal. Few knew it had once been able to sink a warship before anyone even saw it coming. Number 13. S-178. On an October night in 1981, S-178 was returning to Vladivostok when a civilian cargo ship struck her head-on. The collision tore open the submarine's bow, and freezing seawater rushed in. 9 sailors never made it out. Captain Valery Marengo tried to save his crew, but the submarine sank to the bottom of the bay. She was hauled up months later, but never repaired. Instead, she was left tied up at Chazma Bay, her steel sides covered in rust. If she'd been carrying live weapons that night, the blast could have ripped through the harbor, taking civilian ships with it. Number 12. B90 Sarov. B90 Sarov didn't sail much, but it made people uneasy all the same. Built as a one-of-a-kind experimental submarine, its true purpose was never fully explained. Some say it tested new engines that could make a submarine almost silent underwater. Others whisper it was meant to carry weapons no one would admit existed. For years, it sat tied up at Severodvinsk, never officially in service, but never dismantled either. Workers passed it daily without knowing what was sealed behind its hatches. The truth is, no one outside the military knows exactly what Sarov was built to do, and that's what makes it the kind of ship you don't forget. Number 11. K-38. K-38 was a Project 675 nuclear-powered submarine that once carried missiles capable of striking cities thousands of miles away. For years, it prowled the oceans as part of the Soviet Union's strategic strike force. But age caught up with it. After decades in service, it was pulled from active duty and left moored at the naval base in Bolshoi, Cayman. The missiles were removed, but their nuclear reactor stayed on board for years, slowly corroding in the salty air. The surrounding bay could have been poisoned for generations. Today, it's just a rusting hulk, but one with a dangerous past. Number 10. K-429. K-429's story is one of the worst training accidents in Soviet submarine history. In 1983, the crew took the sub out without proper clearance, and almost immediately, disaster struck. Poor maintenance led to flooding, and the submarine sank to the bottom of the Pacific near Petropavlovsk. Many of the crew were trapped inside. 14 never came out alive. The sub was raised, repaired, and put back into service, only to suffer another flooding incident a few years later. After that, it was abandoned in the harbor. Locals could see its hull from shore, not knowing it had already claimed lives twice, and that a submarine like that could sink in minutes if mishandled. Number 9. K-222. K-222 was known as the Golden Fish, not for its color, but because it cost so much to build. Made almost entirely of titanium, it could dive deeper and move faster than any submarine of its time. But speed came at a price. It was so loud underwater that NATO ships could track it easily. By the 1980s, it was retired and tied up at Severodvinsk, still housing a nuclear reactor. Years of neglect ate away at its systems, raising fears of a leak. For visitors, it was an impressive sight, a sleek, silvery relic. But anyone who understood what sat inside knew it wasn't harmless. Number 8. K-8K8 was a nuclear-powered submarine that joined the Soviet fleet in the 1960s. In April 1970, during a major naval exercise in the Bay of Biscay, a fire broke out on board. The crew fought it for hours. Captain Vsevolod Besanov ordered the crew to abandon ship. 42 sailors died in the chaos. K-8 sank in deep waters, still holding 2 nuclear torpedoes. It was never recovered. To this day, it rests on the ocean floor, its weapons slowly corroding. If those warheads ever rupture, they could poison one of the busiest fishing areas in. 7. B-39. B-39 was a diesel-electric Foxtrot-class submarine built to shadow U.S. ships during the Cold War. After decades of service, it was retired in the 1990s and sold to a private buyer in San Diego who turned it into a museum. But years of exposure to salty air and a lack of maintenance left it in a dangerous condition. By the time it was closed to the public, its narrow passageways were coated in rust, and some compartments were unsafe to enter. For tourists, it was an odd attraction. For naval historians, it was unsettling, a war machine with a history of being potent enough to wipe out entire convoys. Number 6. K-141 Kursk. The Kursk was a massive Oscar II-class submarine and one of the pride vessels of the Russian Northern Fleet. In August 2000, during a naval exercise in the Barents Sea, an onboard torpedo malfunctioned and exploded. The blast tore open the forward section and the submarine sank to the seabed. All 118 crew members were lost. The wreck was eventually raised, but not before years passed, with it sitting on the seafloor, its mangled hull a reminder of how quickly disaster can strike. For divers and rescuers, the most haunting detail was knowing some crew survived the explosion, but died waiting for help that never came. For the families of the crew, the wreck is a grave. For scientists and naval experts, it's a reminder that some wreckage is like a sleeping volcano. No one knows when it'll erupt, and the dangers that might haunt the next generations. Number 5. K-219. K-219 was a Yankee-class nuclear submarine that patrolled near the U.S. East Coast during the Cold War. In October 1986, one of its missile tubes leaked, letting seawater mix with fuel and causing an explosion. The blast killed several crew members and left the sub crippled. Captain Igor Britanov managed to surface and evacuate most of the crew before it sank in deep water, still loaded with nuclear missiles. The wreck lies on the Atlantic seabed, where it remains a potential environmental threat. If the warheads inside ever corrode enough to leak, they could release radioactive contamination into the ocean currents that reach both Europe and America. Number 4. K-129. K-129 was a diesel-electric ballistic missile submarine that vanished in March 1968 while patrolling the Pacific. No distress signal was sent. Months later, U.S. intelligence located the wreck nearly 3 miles below the surface. The cause of its loss is still debated. Some say an internal explosion. Others suspect a collision with an American submarine. The Soviets never recovered her. Inside the wreck were nuclear missiles and warheads, now sitting in the crushing depths. The U.S. attempted a secret recovery in the 1970s, but only part of the submarine was brought up. The rest still lies in darkness, its exact condition unknown. Number 3. B307. B307 was a Project 641B, some diesel-electric submarine launched in 1980. During the Cold War, it prowled the Baltic and Arctic waters, tracking NATO fleets' intense cat-and-mouse games. Inside, its torpedo tubes were always ready, and in the event of conflict, it could have crippled enemy ships before they even knew it was there. When it was decommissioned, the Soviets didn't scrap it. They dragged it inland to the Togliatti Technical Museum. Now, it rests on land, its black hull looming over visitors. It's open for tours, but knowing you're standing inside a vessel that was once trained to sink ships and possibly start a war is unsettling. The weapons are gone, but history clings to its steel like a shadow. Number 2. K-19, the Widowmaker. K-19 earned its grim nickname after a 1961 reactor failure that nearly turned it into a floating nuclear bomb. With no backup cooling system, crew members sacrificed themselves to repair the damage, preventing a meltdown. Many died from radiation exposure. The submarine went on to suffer multiple accidents over the years, including fires and collisions. Eventually, it was retired and left to rust at a naval yard. Standing beside it, you'd never guess it once came within hours of triggering a disaster that could have killed thousands and poisoned the ocean for decades. Number 1. K-131 K-131 was a nuclear-powered submarine stationed in the Northern Fleet. In June 1984, a fire broke out in one of its compartments while it was submerged in the Norwegian Sea. The blaze spread quickly, killing 13 crew members and forcing the sub to surface. It limped back to port, badly damaged. Instead of being repaired, it was left moored at Widowmaker, its reactors still intact for years. Locals knew about the hot vessel tied up in their harbor. Still, few realized how long-term radiation exposure could harm the community if the reactor casing ever failed. Today, these Soviet submarines are quiet, but quiet doesn't mean safe. Some still hold nuclear reactors, their cores slowly aging in rusting hulls. Others carry warheads buried under silt, waiting for corrosion to set them free. In ports, they sit like harmless museum pieces. But a breach in their containment could poison the sea and skies for decades. The absolute terror is knowing they're still out there, and there's nothing we can do to stop them if the worst happens.